Cool. Hey, everyone. Um, awesome. I'm Zach. I currently work at a startup called Crosby Legal. It's a tech startup, but it's also a law firm, um, which is an interesting change of pace for me. I say it in that sort of way because I joined just a few weeks ago. So when I was preparing this presentation, I was very much in between uh, work situations. But it's been a really fun ramp up into a new domain. I know tonight's talk is called Beyond Text, but very much the medium of lawyers is text. So I have some like thoughts on that at the end. But um, prior to that, I was working at a AI research lab here in the city called Hume. And Hume's mission was to sort of explore this emotional embedding space with AI, trying to understand, how we could add more of an empathetic or human quality to how AI is working in our day to day. And one of the formats that took was this mobile app. It was a conversational modality where you could kind of talk to this agent, companion, assistant, whatever sort of new word we're using um, for these systems. And it was not just listening to what you were saying, but also the tone and delivery and pacing of how you were saying it. And this was a really interesting domain to spend a lot of time thinking about. And yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about voice, so I thought I would share kind of what I've been thinking over the past 3 years. And yeah, I think one starting place is that speaking is just sort of our natural default. Like I am today, I'm speaking to all of you. If you are at work, you're often just speaking with your colleagues. And so uh, really it's like typing is kind of the secondary thing for us. It's sort of like the alternative to when we can't speak to people face to face. And so at the same time, that's like the primary modality of speaking with our computers. We have to learn very specific vocabulary. We have to be very precise in the ordering of the words that we're using. You can't make any typos or mistakes. And so when you have like a miscommunication when you're speaking, resolving that is a lot more straightforward, but resolving that with a computer is a lot more challenging. And we can kind of add speech to computers at this point. They can transcribe what we're saying. They can also speak back to us. But when that misunderstanding happens, it's usually more of the fault of the transcription layer, or it's still not quite understanding what we're saying or how we're saying that. And kind of an early example of this was like really early natural language processing. And so this is a very dated reference by tech standards. But you can kind of see why it came to that conclusion. It has like action words like, can you call me? And then a noun, an ambulance. And it's sort of just like finding pattern matching. Like, what is the thing that the user is trying to ask me to do? These are a list of dictionary words that I know mean different intentions. And then what are the variables that it's trying to have me plug into these different functions? And so LLMs basically replaced this less intricate process for parsing rules, understanding intention. And so at Hume, we were also thinking that an additional point of context is not just understanding your word choice, but also how those words make sense with expressions. So we had these classification models that could look at text or audio or image input, and it could detect what a human would probably assign as the expressed emotion in that content. So the kind of primary thesis there is that it's not just what you say, but also how you're saying it. And so another version that came through was in measuring over time the different expressions that are coming through in that tune, rhythm, timbre of speech. And you can kind of see the compare and contrast here. It's the same audio file, same timeline, but the actual words that are being spoken kind of differ in the delivery in their kind of highlighted expressions that they conform. And then another angle to that is the speed and pacing dimension. So we can speak a lot more words than we can type. I think we saw a really good demo of that earlier. And so at the same time, transcription alone is sort of missing some of the additional context that you get in, errors that might happen in it mishearing what you're saying, or like skipping through different words. An example of that I recalled was recently I was using Claude Code on my phone to try to like get some stuff started on my way into the office, and it thought that I was talking about Maine, like the state of Maine. And I was really just sort of like using the sort of tech jargon of like, oh yeah, it's like on Maine, like it's on the Maine branch. And so it's like, I did say that they're homophones, they sound exactly the same. It's that context. I was in Claude Code, so it should know that I'm like coding. At the same time, it also has like the context of other conversations I've had with it, and I grew up in Maine, so I can understand how it would be like, these things are both valuable to you to some extent. I don't know which one. But then it reasoned through it, and you can kind of see that it's like, it's likely referring to a Maine branch, not the state of Maine. The user was being kind of silly there. And so I think it's this combination of transcription, us being able to sort of like throw data at the system, and then also its ability to sort of like figure out like what the actual intention that is there, ends up being really key to have together. And I had forgotten that I did this, but this was a like hackathon project that I made, I think in 2024. And we never really explored it further. And I'm going to try to. And I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's not cropped or anything. But we made this like little assistant that lived in the corner of your screen, and you could talk to it, and it would run bash commands. And at the time, it felt kind of different and new. And you would just kind of like chill out and live there. These were just, I thought these were funny. I don't really have much to say about them. But at the same time, like this is actually now kind of my day-to-day. I'm using Claude Code, I'm using transcription to just kind of like throw text to it. I'm letting it figure out what it is that I want to do. And then there's this like really tight feedback loop that's happening there. At the same time, there are some drawbacks to this. So primarily, it doesn't really work well in shared spaces like an office space. There's kind of some solutions that people are working through of like maybe we use a model that can detect whispering, and then I get like a very special microphone so that like nobody else can hear me. Or maybe I go even further and I get this like really self-contained sort of like echo chamber Dune-like device. But I don't know what that means. I think that's just something that ends up being a little bit of a drawback. Additionally, like in the same way that you have to be alone, like you can't really bring this into a group conversation, which I feel like could be another thing that unlocks some new capabilities. Right now you have this like back and forth, it's like user, assistant, and that's pretty much the expectation. So if you have more than one speaker, it all just gets kind of collapsed into one thread of context. And this is challenging because of the way that you have to compare audio samples to know if it's a different speaker. And right now the latency that introduces into the flow just doesn't really offer that as like a real-time function. But this could be something that could be interesting. It's like more of a group Zoom call where you have multiple people, and then you also have an agent that just kind of chimes in when necessary. Hopefully it doesn't talk over you in the middle of a meeting. But then, yeah, in tandem with this, it's just always assuming that everything it hears is directed for it. It doesn't know if I'm talking to someone else, or even if it's just like background noise sometimes. An example of this that's kind of funny is when the police were using transcription with some body cam footage. The transcription said that the officer turned into a frog because there was a Disney movie that was playing on the TV, and it was just like collapsing all of those different audio streams into the same moment. And I was testing this out just to see like if it improved. And at the same time, I kind of realized it's similar to that like typo situation where you can kind of read the actual words and kind of deduce that like, oh, in that middle part, like there was an interruption and maybe I should ignore those pieces. So maybe there's some reasoning that like the LLM will just know which things end up being noise in the transcription. Yeah, so I like to call this kind of like our walkie-talkie era. It's very much like you have to provide intention, you have to press a button to say, I'm speaking now, and then, everything else just like don't pay attention to. At the same time, I think this is kind of a cool new interaction paradigm. So this was a demo I found on Twitter. I don't think it's on GitHub. I tried really hard to try to find a source. But this user created a basically walkie-talkie. He's pointing at different terminals on his phone, and then he's using one of the volume buttons, I think, to kind of start transcribing and just like watching that be entered into the terminal. And then I guess when it's released, it hits enter, and then it just starts running. So he's kind of like dispatching different audio snippets to different agents. And then this was another example by a creative technologist. I think her name is Diana Liu. She has this really cool write-up on her website, so I would definitely check it out. But in this demo, she's circling a part of the image while also describing what she wants to change, and then kind of collaborating with the agent process by using those multiple input methods. So it's audio, but it's also traditional sort of like pointing gesture input that we're kind of used to as designers. So I think this is kind of like where I'm sitting with this idea, is that voice is just like another layer that you can use as supplemental context to some of the existing design paradigms that we have with inputs, triggers, gestures, visuals. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what comes next after walkie-talkie, but maybe someone in this room will figure it out. So in the interim at Crosby, the problem space that I'm working in is kind of similar. Lawyers work with a lot of text. There's a lot of talking over each other, having to parse through all these comments and red lines in Microsoft Word, which is crazy. But I think it's interesting. It's a design space that maybe could benefit from voice. I have some things that I'm like itching to share with people, but I've only been there for a few weeks. So stay tuned. But yeah, that's all I have to share. Thanks.